Today, we're going to take a look at obscure and unknown punctuation marks, weird punctuation marks that you had no idea actually existed. And some of them actually aren't even allowed in the United States, but they're out there. And so it would be interesting to see what some of the possibilities are. So let's take a look at some of these. Follow along on your PDF with me. So the first one we have is what we call the Dagger, and that is his two-headed friend, the double dagger, right next door. So the dagger is sometimes referred to as the obelisk, and the double dagger is also referred to as the diesis. It kind of looks like a javelin, and originally they were used in terms of like sort of proofreading, in that we would use these items to cut out anything that's extraneous words. If there's some extra words in a document, then you use the dagger, the double dagger, to cut them out. But now you'll see them more in advertising, or if you work in a field of like law, and we use these for oftentimes for footnotes. You'll see like an advertisement, you'll see a dagger or a double dagger next to a claim at the very bottom of the page. Then you'll see it as a footnote to kind of tell us what it's referring to. So I wish it was still used in a more violent way, but it's not. The next one's called the caret, and you know the caret. You've seen them before. It's referred to as the wedge, the up arrow, the hat. It comes from Latin, so as most things do. It means it lacks, which just makes sense because we oftentimes will use a caret to kind of say, hey, I'm missing something or I'm lacking something, and so we kind of caret in some extra words. We know this one already. We just kind of push Shift and 6, and ta-da, there's the caret. Now, this one's probably new to us. Now, we know the backslash, but we may not know what we call the Solidus. So they're really different. In reality, the backslash is actually much more vertical than it is slanted, even though we call it a slash. But the Solidus is probably what you're using more than you're using the backslash. So here's a little history on the Solidus. So the Solidus, let's see if I can get my pen to show up here. Good. So the Solidus basically was a way of letting us know about the way that we break down currency. So think about if I was going to write about currency, we all say like it's $12.36. Well, this little decimal here separates, the, let's see if I can get that guy to disappear, our dollars from our cents. And so we have had a little decimal there. Well, back in Britain, when they have different types of currency, they have like the pound, they have the shilling, and they have a thing called the pence. Well, they would use the Solidus as a way of separating those different denominations or currencies. And so what the Solidus was, it was actually a way of noting what they called the shilling mark. Now, a long time ago, S's actually looked like this, real elongated shapes is how we made our S's. And so the S shape was our way of letting us know that we were dealing with a shilling. So over time, this S shape turned into this shape right here, which is what we call a Solidus. And so now we use a Solidus oftentimes as a way of separating like sort of choices. So if you say yes / no, you're not really saying yes / no, you're saying yes Solidus no. Or and / or, you'd say and Solidus or is what it really is. So this one's called the Solidus. This is the Asterism, which is a really cool looking structure, but it's kind of a lame use. We would use this one in terms of writing if we were going to separate sections within a writing, not necessarily between chapters, but within a chapter. So if you think back to writing number 2, we had an introduction and we took a physical space before we then jumped right into our work on semantics. Well, if you didn't want to do a physical space, you could have put something cool like this, like an asterism, as a way of noting that you've sort of changed somehow within that, I guess, essay between the introduction and this abrupt change over into semantics. So we use this asterism for that reason. All right, so if you go into publishing, you might come across the asterism. Nowadays, it actually is just simply 3 little asterisks in a row. But if you do go on to like a word processor like Google Docs or maybe a Word, you can actually find this one. It still exists. These are called Little Williams. And the French word, I'll probably butcher it, I think is pronounced guillemets. And so these are the guillemets. These guys are basically called angle quotes. And so in some foreign languages, this is how we actually use quotation marks. And so the dialogue would fit in between these. And so this would be single quotes over here, and these would be your double quotes. And so if you study French or Italian, Russian, languages like that, you'll see these being used as punctuation marks, the Little Williams or the guillemets. Now, this is the Sheffer stroke and the double bar. And I didn't mention them or list them here, but there's also the broken bar. This is called the pulley sometimes, or the double pull. And you will find this if you get into higher levels of math. So when you get into different propositional calculus, you'll find that you'll start using these little structures called Sheffer strokes and double bars for that. If you get into computer coding and programming, you'll also use the stroke as well as you might use the broken bar, where there's a space between them. I find it sometimes in my Bible where they'll use the Sheffer stroke along the side of the margins to let me know that there's a footnote at the bottom of the page. So this is certainly something you'll come across if you go into computers, if you go into mathematics, into some really higher level things. All right, this is my personal favorite, I think, of all. This is the because sign. So the because sign is traditionally three dots in this direction. Its opposite would be the therefore sign, which is three dots in this direction. Now, this is the one I originally learned probably back when I was in middle school. I remember taking geometry in, like, I don't know, eighth grade, ninth grade, something like that. And we had to learn this word therefore. And every time we did a proof, we had to always end our proof with the final line, which was three dots. We had to go dot, dot. Oh, I can't get this thing to do this. Dot, dot. You're not making dots for me now. Oh my goodness, go backwards. All right, dot, dot. Oh, okay. This is disastrous. There we go. Dot. We'll just give up on this, everybody. So here we'd say dot. We'll just do this. So we go dot, dot, dot. And then we would have to then write our final line of our proof. Well, a long time ago, therefore and because were synonymous, meaning that the meaning of therefore and the meaning of because were the same. Well, obviously, that's not true anymore. They're completely different words. And so the three dots in this direction mean therefore, and the three dots in this direction mean because. So if you get into some science and some math fields, you might come across this notation when you're doing lab work, or some particular professors might use this as a way of doing some shorthand on the word therefore and because. If you go onto your Word documents or your Google Docs, I guarantee if you go under insert symbols, you'll find these. Next, this is the section sign. This is a legal structure that you'll use. If you go into law, you will use section signs. So unlike documents and essays that have pages, they use the section sign in legal documents. So if I was talking about something between pages 1 and 2, we use a double P to let us know pages 1 through 2, as opposed to just simply page 1. So two P's mean two pages. So in legal documents, they don't use paragraphs or pages, they use sections. And so this is the section sign. So this would be one section, or you might see them listed twice as saying, sections 1 through 2. So the section sign. All right, this is a really cool one. These are the exclamation commas and the question commas. This is number 9 and 10 on your PDF. So the exclamation comma actually was something that came out of Canada in 1992. It lasted for about 3 years or so. It had a patent, meaning it was someone owned it, and then the patent ran out. And so you can certainly use it if you want to. You're not going to be able to find this on a Google Doc or a Word document. You're going to have to draw it yourself. But it's really kind of a cool thing. Think about the idea of what if you were writing a sentence which is exclamatory, but the sentence was actually compound and it wanted to continue on. You're thinking, I don't understand. Let me give you an example. What if I wrote something like, how tired I am, exclamation mark. But what if you want to continue your sentence? So if you're like, comma, for I have been up all night. Well, the first part is exclamatory, how tired I am, exclamation mark, but it's a compound sentence, comma, for I've been up all night. And that makes it an exclamation comma perfect for this sentence. What if I did a question comma? What if I said something like, let's do you want to go to prom? Question mark. But what if my sentence continues? So I take this question mark and make it into a question comma. Do you want to go to prom, comma? For I have no date. The back half is a statement, but the front half is a question. Why not use the question comma? All right. So obviously you can use these in Canada, or at least you could for a while. Supposedly you can still use them in Australia because anything goes in Australia. So there you go. But these are really cool punctuation marks. Next up, the Enterobang. So as opposed to what's illegal in Canada and Australia, the Enterobang is 100% legal in the United States. It is a punctuation mark a lot of people don't realize exists. The Enterobang is a combination of the exclamation mark and the question mark. And if we added those two together, we get the Enterobang. Because how often do you actually text something and you're like, what? Exclamation mark, question mark. But what if you said, what? And use the Enterobang? A brilliant marriage of both the exclamation point and the question mark together. I love this. So this is very much legal. You should use it all the time. It's a great one, the Enterobang. Now, this one I wouldn't encourage using. This is the Hedera. So the Hedera actually comes from the Latin word ivy, because it's supposed to look like an ivy leaf. So before anyone invented indentation, it sounds so basic, but you're thinking like we've not always indented paragraphs. So when people a long time ago would write, they would just make these long blocks of ideas. And every single time you had like a new idea and you wanted to kind of like break the flow, you would have to physically draw this little structure. Every single time you had to like draw some kind of ivy leaf structure every time in this paragraph. Mine looks more like a heart right there, like a pig heart or something. And so every time you had a new idea, you had to draw that. How annoying would that be? But that was the original purpose, to actually make this little note, because no one thought, we should just simply press enter, indent, and start a brand new paragraph. And so these blocky writings that we do have all these little ivy leaves all through the essay as a way of letting us know that you've actually changed your ideas within that essay. Crazy. So the Hedera was the originator, and then that gave way to the Pilcrow. Everyone knows the Pilcrow, I guarantee it. The Pilcrow is that traditional way of actually making a new paragraph sign. Now, a lot of people look at it like this, but if you'll notice, this is supposed to be filled in. That's why it's called the blind P. And I'm not making that up. That's what it's really called, the blind P. And that's why it's filled in like that. So someone invented this once again because we had these long paragraphs. No one really wanted to draw those ivy leaves over and over and over again. So every time we had a new idea, we would draw a little blind P, and that would let us know that you've decided to change your ideas. Pretty cool stuff, if you ask me. And eventually, someone once again decided, let's figure out an easier way of doing that, and someone along the way invents indentation. But until then, we have the Pilcrow. Now, this is the Percontation Point. So about 1580, we had someone who actually created this thing called a Percontation Point, which is sort of also referred to as the rhetorical question mark. It's a question mark which is backwards, because what if you asked a question that you don't want an answer to, which is what we call a rhetorical question. So it's like saying, does any of this matter? And then you put a backwards question mark as a way of letting us know I'm not looking for an answer. It's simply rhetorical. And therefore, we call it the percontation or the rhetorical question mark. So it's a backwards question mark at the end of a question that you don't want an answer for. That was pretty cool. I'm not sure why this one never took off, but I think you should bring it back. Now, similar to this is what we call the irony mark. The irony mark is sort of like a backwards question mark, but it's actually sort of superscript, meaning it's a little higher above all the rest of the letters, and it actually sits in front of the actual sentence. So you would actually draw this first, and then the rest of the sentence would be down here, and you would say, oh, I am so interested. And it's your way of being sort of snarky, a little bit ironic, a little bit twisted sort of thing. And so has a little bit of attitude to it. So if you're trying to actually have a little bit of sarcasm to your voice, you might throw in the irony or the sarcastic sort of mark at the top of the sentence. Once again, a backwards question mark, somewhat superscript above the rest of the letters. There you go. This one didn't necessarily take off, but this is the first of 6 punctuation marks that came out of France in the 1960s by this guy whose last name I think is like Bazine. And so he came up with some really bizarre punctuation marks, none of which really stuck around, but some of them are cooler than others. This one, it's okay. I like this one though, the love point. Look at this, two question marks sort of sharing that same dot going in different directions. This is one where you would say something like, oh, it's time for grammar class, love point, or happy anniversary, love point. So same guy coming out of France, 1960s, comes up with a love point. I like this one. You're not going to find this one out. You have to draw it if you want to use it in a document. Now, the acclamation point, another one of his creations. This is his third one, the acclamation point. This is a way of sort of like proclaiming something, like saying, hey, welcome, or open arms sort of feel to it. So it's like saying, I'm so happy to see you, acclamation point. So it's very welcoming sort of feel to the acclamation point. Here's another one, Certitude Point. It's basically an exclamation mark with a line through it. It's a straight line, though. That's really critical. It's a straight line. It's a way of saying, I'm so certain of what I just said that not only did I put a really bold exclamation point with it, but I drew a line through it to let you know I'm confident of what I just said. And that's called the Certitude Point. There's also the doubt point. What if what you just said you're not really sure about? So you draw a doubt point, which it's been a long time since I've been in music class, but I don't know. This looks like some kind of weird rest. I'm not sure what that could be, but there you go. The doubt point. You have to really draw that one. And the last of the six from this guy from France is the authority point. Once again, another exclamation point, but you said something that you are an authority on. Sort of like saying, hey, I've been there, done that, bought the t-shirt, you can trust me on this. And so therefore, not only do I give you an exclamation point, but I'm going to put a big old umbrella around it to let you know, trust me, I'm an authority. I got your back. I got you covered in a sense. And I think that's why it's curving like that. So there you go. Then there are what we call the snark marks. Now, the original one is called a sark mark, and a sark mark is trademarked, meaning it's copyrighted and you really can't use it. So, for me, even putting it onto this document right now, I'm breaking copyright rules because this is owned by a guy named Paul Sack. And so he owns it. If you want to use it, you'd have to then pay money because he owns it. And so no one wants to pay money for a punctuation mark, and that's why no one uses the sark mark. Everyone likes this guy because he's free. You push the period button, you push the tilde button, which is, I believe, on your upper left-hand corner of your keyboard, and you have a sarcastic comment. It's like saying, ooh, I love this PowerPoint, Mr. Marsh, period, tilde. And it's your way of being really snarky. Thanks, everybody. And lastly are our dashes. There are two different dashes. There's the M dash and the N dash. The M dash is called the M dash because it is basically the length of a lowercase m. And the N dash is called the N dash because it is the length of a lowercase n. The N dash is like a little minus sign. And so we use this if we have like dates like, hey, between 1890 and 1910, we put a little minus sign, a little N dash between it. Most of the time when we're talking about dashes in English class and on the SAT, and the way we use dashes is we oftentimes are using the M dash. When I use it in typing, I actually insert it physically by going up to symbols and I insert my M dash. But you can oftentimes get your computer to do it for you by pushing a minus sign twice and then pressing a space button. And then your computer oftentimes will take those two minus signs and combine them into one longer M dash. So anytime we talk about the dashes, that's typically what we're using, the M dash. Otherwise, if we're just to be kind of connecting two dates or two pages or two things like that, we would just use a little minus sign or the N dash. And those are some obscure and unknown punctuation marks that are sometimes fun to kind of work in occasionally to an essay.